is money.
It's nothing.
Ballin', premium or nothing.
When them or nothing.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Now you know.
Forget what they know, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone, to Couch Chronicles, Therapist After Dark. We're here for a wonderful episode about identity.
Hey.
All right, so let's start off with a mindfulness exercise. You can get into a comfortable position. I'm going to guide you all through an imagery. You can close your eyes if you want to, or just take a low gaze. And we'll start with a few deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you settle into your breath, allow any thoughts to drift away. Begin to call to mind a place where you feel settled. A place where you might feel relaxed, warm and loved. Try to imagine the sounds that you might hear in this place. Take a moment to picture what you might see here. Shapes, colors, people. Notice any smells that might be in the air in this place. You feel relaxed, safe and loved. What kind of textures are in this space? What can you touch here? How would you describe them? If soft and cozy, rough, sharp. There's some textures in this space where you feel loved and safe. Notice the full sensory experience of being in this space. How does your body respond to being here? Take note of what you notice. What is your mind offering you when you're in this space? Really take in how you feel and offering yourself some gratitude for being able to create this space in your mind. When you're ready to come back to the present, you can do so by inviting some movement into the space with a bit of a stretch, moving your fingers and toes, taking a few deeper intentional breaths here at the end. And when you feel ready, gently blinking the eyes open. What did you all notice about yourselves when constructing your space?
Well, since we're looking at you, I noticed that first I struggled to go into my space, and then once I walked into the space, I also noticed that through the space, it transcended to me being around loved ones, to me being by myself.
Okay.
And I just observed that, and then I noticed that at one point, physical sensation of a smile came to my face. But it was towards the end of the exercise. That's when I realized, oh, I'm in the room by myself, and you're good, you're calm, and I just find myself just like in that solace.
When you
Yeah.
say struggle to get there, what do you mean?
I just couldn't think of a place, and I don't know if it's just I needed to take more. I took a couple more deep breaths to kind of ground into it, and just really couldn't visualize something
Okay, so
like automatic.
I'm hearing
Okay.
that you had to kind of slow down at the beginning to really allow that space to come to you versus searching
Exactly.
for it, looking for it. Nice.
Exactly.
Thanks, Jay. What about you, Steph?
So, I noticed that immediately I felt a sense of like just stillness. When you had kind of like said like go to that place that you feel kind of like comfortable, or I immediately went to like my bed and noticed there was some thoughts about like that being a place like I literally
You love it
That's
there.
definitely your safe space.
I do love it there. Because it first started out, my couch was like starting to load up in my mind, and then it was like, the bed's actually a lot much more. And I noticed like imagery around like my blanket, the color of it, the texture, how it's like big and like pillowy and cloudy. When I was thinking of like, when you said shapes, I kept going to like circles, like just kept coming in my mind, and I'm not sure if that's what I would say I would put in my like space of like safety or comfort, or if that's just the shape that just kept coming to my mind.
Yeah.
And as I tried to like expand to think about like triangles, I was like, that seems not right there. It felt like not. And stars, no, that doesn't feel right there. So going back to circles, clouds, and still bouncing back and forth with that pillowy
Right.
like vibe pretty much. And then like colors of like pink, soft pink with like the blue of my blanket would show up. And then when you went to sounds, I've noticed I was immediately brought to the sounds of like birds, like in like a forest or like sea, like that where there's a distance where you can hear them, but they're not like gawking in your ear, but it's like a nice
They're in the
with
background,
wind, right,
yeah.
type of
Seen
thing.
them. Yeah,
Feeling
just
like
noticing
really
it.
being able to get to that, and then also silence. So it would either be when you directed us to sound of the birds, or it was just nothing at all, but really kind of sticking with the textures and just what that experience was like. And then having like, I think you had asked us or had said something about like who you would invite or who would be
Like
there.
people, who'd you see? Yeah, so.
And this pretty much a thought, that idea has been spinning in my mind for the last couple of days, and that's kind of the figure that I saw there with me, but it was more of like instead of like a person, more of like a figure, like just laying there with me and feeling a sense of like warmth in like that embrace and that feeling. Like that's what it was, just feeling embraced by my covers, by my, and that just feeling like nice.
Yeah, that being the touch for you. In my experience, I immediately had a place in mind, like as soon as I started talking about what, like creating the place. And then I had like a lot of future thinking around like, well, when am I going to get there? We're already almost done with the first quarter of the year and I haven't touched a lick of sand. So like that was definitely an active thought. And I think that has gone along with, a feeling that I've just been having today around like angst, like hurry up and get to the good parts, the warmth, the breeze, the pink sand.
And then when you were there, were you able to stay there outside of worrying about those other thoughts?
Once I got there, I was able to get into just kind of being in the space, really noticing the textures, but thinking about those things also brought up memories. And so it definitely had me kind of engaging in some thinking as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you. Let's get
appreciate-
into it. How do you identify? This is going to be a juicy topic today.
I think it is. I definitely think it is. And I think our listeners, our confession is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So let's listen to our confession.
Sure.
I've been working on connecting with myself to develop a more authentic identity. I tend to adopt traits, hobbies, and even temperaments from people I admire, creating a version of myself that feels more like a performance than the real me. I've struggled with this since early childhood and often overthink identity in abstract, unattainable ways. With my therapist's help, I'm trying to see identity as something more concrete. I recently started journaling to map out my values, strength, and temperament and physical traits. But I still question whether my likes, dislikes, beliefs are truly mine or just absorbed from others. How can I differentiate the real me from the persona I built? What practical strategies help others develop a true sense of self?
A lot of questions about who am I versus who society tells me or who I've thought I'm
Who I've
supposed to
subscribed to,
be,
yeah.
things of that, as well as trying to create a roadmap to be more authentic. It seems like and more
Yeah.
genuine in their selves.
Yeah. And I think the question I think I have around this as I'm thinking about is that can we ever truly have an identity that isn't influenced by others, or is individuality just like an illusion?
You know, I don't know that there is really ever a time where you will not be influenced by something.
Yeah.
Whether it is the things that you consume, the people that you're around, the culture, the environment, there's no way to develop your identity without those things. So I think it's kind of like a fine line of how the ways that you identify, how does that also align with your values and interests, and like how can you look at it more from that perspective versus just like wanting to be something to fit into a space.
Yeah. I also think that when we talk about identity is naming, right? Who you are. Identity is belonging to something. And if you think about like the simplest form, the ways that we are identified in this world is through our name, which is being given and influenced by someone else.
Yeah.
Right, already from
Right
the womb.
off the bat, right? Like there's certain expectations, certain things that go into the name that you are called by your caregivers, by your parents, right? So that already is going to carry something.
Yeah.
And also, I think this individuality, I don't think is an illusion, right? I don't necessarily think that just because we are influenced by others from our conception that we cannot be individual from the group. But if we look at like, you said, can we ever truly have an identity that isn't influenced by others? No, because our values, to even know what you're not about, you have to know what you are in, right? And so your family tells you what you are in, right? From your race to your traditions, to your religion, to how you dress, to how people perceive you. You already start to think about other people's idea of you from your parents and your and I'm saying
The
parents. Some of us people have
expectations,
caregivers. Some people have like extended family who's
who
very
raised us,
impactful in their lives, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that you cannot be influenced by something. I do think individuality can stem from the things that we are in, right? Just because my family celebrates and champions this thing, I'm individual from that because I see a different way to show up to champion other things.
Yeah. I think here's the thing. I think identity is the whole idea. I mean, this is why we're in the field that we are in around like knowing who I am and why does it matter. At a very early age, I think for me, with my parents, I think it's the whole idea. It was like a spiritual thing, right? Around the fact that, you know, you are God, you're wonderfully made. God created you as you. And I think for me, I didn't, early on, I didn't struggle with identity, but I know there was a sense of urgency of knowing where I belong in my family as who I am.
Like what your role was.
Yeah, what my role was. And early on, I also felt like it was put on me.
Yeah.
Because, my parents would be like, oh, this is our wild one right here. Like our middle child, so for me, there was a need to live up to whatever was considered wild, right? Because I was hyper, I was fun, I was this. So for me, that automatically like what I attach to. But I think sometimes people, especially now, with all the different changes and
the way
identity and identifying,
there's so much different language.
I think it
now.
brings about confusion, and that's just my stance on it. I think it brings more confusion for people around the urgency to feel belonging and the urgency of questioning who they are. I think innately, with your experiences, you tend to develop like the different things. I think the need to belong to a specific thing, to feel connected to a specific thing. And I think the fact that we live in a society who just keep bombarding us with all this over informational. I'm one who believes that too much information can just be too much for people.
It can be too much to sort out.
Yeah, it could be too much, and it makes you question everything. So then I think it get lost. I think with this confession is around the fact that with this person, they've been bombarded, but they at some point they learn that, taking different pieces of that they see in their friends and family members is something that was inauthentic to who they are.
Yeah.
And the word authentic sometimes just irks me, because then who's defining that?
Yeah,
right?
this is relatable
Yeah.
for sure. I think I had a lot of experiences that were similar to that, like growing up. Just because I think I grew up in an environment that was not affirming to like who I genuinely felt like. I was an energetic kid. I had a lot of opinions. I was making a lot of observations and having a lot to say.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a space where people did not want to hear from my black ass. They're like, this little black girl has got too much to say.
Yeah.
So I think that I was often corrected, or like almost every report card said, she's great at her academics. She talks entirely too much. So just imagine like how you're internalizing that as a kid. That comes up as an adult as like you don't want to have too much to say.
Right. Or get upset when somebody shuts you down.
That part. I think that I've
like,
kind of fluctuated between that,
Yeah.
right? I think that in my more like spicy years, like my like late teens, 20s, like college years, I was very much like on the extreme side. I'm not going to be letting anybody tell me that I can't say what I need to say, or like if you are shutting me down in any way, that's a fight. Those are fighting words. So I think that like having to really figure out like my identity, I don't really think I settled on like what I felt was it until I was like 30.
Or felt comfortable. And
Yeah.
I guess I kind of want to go back, Jay, because Jay, you and I have had this conversation a lot. And let me just be clear, I disagree. Okay?
Yeah.
I disagree a lot about labels, and I think the uptick of labels, I think, is needed. Because
language,
there's
yeah.
a lot of people who have been given a singular message about who you are, what gender looks like, how you're supposed to show up, how other people are supposed to see you, and the labels question that. And I think questioning is important so that you then like look for more. Because like there's a lot of people, I'm sure Tyler, with your upbringing, like you were saying, there was a lot of messaging around how you're supposed to dress. 'Cause I remember you told me about like religion aspect of your upbringing, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to show up, how you're supposed to be seen by the outside world. And it's not until you start hearing terms that aren't in the singular place that you're in that you then be like, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Oh, that's what that means. Oh, maybe that's why I've been feeling weird or like not fully committed or like to this thing.
Yeah.
Because, there was this other thing out there that you could be. So that's why for me, I think that the more labels that are coming out there allows people to feel like they can belong to something.
Yeah.
Or feel like, oh, actually, I don't need to be just one thing. I can be multiple things.
I think that's
that,
both
like, what
and,
I have
yeah.
seen is that a lot of people are picking stuff and seeing that identity is not one color.
Yeah.
I can have purple, I can have blue, I can have red, I can have orange, I can have all of these things.
Yeah.
And the interaction of all these different entities is what makes up me. That's what makes up my identity.
I think you make a great point around that. I think that perhaps that we're looking at both and here, right?
Yeah.
Because I think you make some really great points around. In my own personal experience, I felt like I was able to understand more about my identity through exposure, through different language. And I do think that having more discussion and language that people are putting to stuff allows for that exposure, questioning. I can also see at the same time how that can create some confusion
of it.
or oversaturation. And so it really is a matter of like, how can you find what you're looking for and how can you be supported in looking for that?
And to the point that I'm making and I continue to make, so yes, you and I do have like a fundamental disagreement around that, is the fact that we don't do labels, but labels matter to people.
Right.
And that's the part where I'm like, you know, you don't want to attach yourself to anyone because you think, well, I'm not just this one person. But in a way, you actually do want to attach yourself to something to feel like you belong, like to this group, to this culture, to understanding even your sense of self. And I think even with this, it's like with this person, okay, now I'm journaling, now I'm doing this, now I'm doing all these things. And then now I'm still questioning, is this a persona or this is really me? And this is the part where I said the oversaturation become too much. Because it's really, to me, it's about being and living. I've always felt like if I can just be me, whatever that means for that day, that moment, then that's really
fine.
what matters.
Yeah.
And I think and don't get it confused with social norms and expectations and traditions. You know, I come from a tradition where I do question it. You know, I'm like you, Tyler, and I'm like, now, look, at a very early age, I didn't really care for women of my culture. I just did not. I just felt like it was a yes, sir, and ma'am type of culture. I actually honored the male authority. I was very attracted to that in a sense of like there was more liberation. There was more freedom and power. And so for me, at an early age, I gravitated more towards like my father, and he kind of willed me in around the fact that he had free choice. Now I was a little bit too free, you know what I mean? Like, so part of that, I think, is that for me, it had to change for me to understand what being a woman or being a girl actually meant.
Yeah.
But it was never taken away from me to act either or. Was I judged? Because I remember my parents was like, you know, she's too much. Like, the idea of being too much. Like, okay, you guys need to slow her down. But then there was my parents also coming to terms like, we have two daughters who are completely opposite of each other. And my father, I think, never wanted to tame me, but my mother wanted to tame me out of the fact that that's not how a girl should be acting. So why does that matter? I think it's all about like you can challenge social norms and tradition. I think it's an idea of, are you challenging it because it's not connecting to you, or is it just you just in a state of being on a day-to-day. So I think if people just be, they don't want to be labels, but technically you hold on to labels. So my whole thing is, if we're oversaturated with, you know, we have this, you could be this, you could be that, you could be that, you could be that, to me, that tend to cause a sense of confusion around in a state of just being.
Okay, so then
that's where I'm at with it.
So let me add on top of that, because I agree with the thing about, like, if you are authentic and present in the moment, being able to figure out who you are isn't as difficult, right? But can I just call out a fundamental difference between what you were saying in your experience and what Tyler experienced? You got support,
right?
In that exploration, you got some level of guidance and some level of covering to some extent.
Right.
From what I've heard with Tyler, there was a very much
not a lot of support, no
support, no kind of like encouragement. And I know even from my experience, not only there wasn't any support, there was often a lot of like pain. There are a lot of people who tend to be confused. I think it's less
But
about,
I was also isolated because of the way that I chose
Yeah.
to live.
True.
It's just in a different how it affected
in
me.
a different, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm saying you had different protective factors is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to point out. In comparison to the folks who you say that tend to be confused about who they are, there was a mortal wound very early on
Right.
that disrupted their ability to just be.
Yeah.
So that thing of like, oh, I need to belong, that belonging comes with a certain level of stability that I never experienced. So it's like I do this hop skip thing of like, am I this, am I this, am I this, searching for grounding and a certain like acceptance. But if my family, my what's called loved ones, my environment never validated or recognized me in any kind of capacity and kept trying to shove me into
a
being
box,
this
like
thing,
being a certain
Yeah.
I'm
way.
not going to feel or even know what it's like to
Right.
just be. That's where I think that you and I have see things a little bit differently, is because I do agree that being helps
It's
you
necessary, yeah.
sitting
Yeah.
and grounding
hard to
and
get
being
there.
present. But if you didn't get a roadmap, nobody taught you, nobody even recognized you when you attempted to, that's why
Yeah.
it's like, let me go to some identity or some label that will maybe give me that guidance, maybe give me that blueprint.
So then is identity more like a personal issue than it is like a social issue, like a larger social norm issue? Is it a both and? Or because technically with this is like sometimes, especially now, some people just aspire due to social media influence a lot regarding like
How
the
people
youth
wanna
identity
show
and how
up,
they
yeah.
identify.
Yeah.
So, a lack of deep community connection.
I think
So
that it is.
what is the
I think
struggling
that
with
perhaps
identity, you
social
think?
media has maybe heightened some ways that people have access
Yeah.
to communities that they can connect to.
Mm-hmm.
And that has in turn impacted the identity. But I think that looking to your community or looking to your environment or the things that are around you is a natural way that people have identified throughout time.
Right.
I think for me, I grew up in an area that was mixed culturally, but kind of classist.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of like have and have not kind of energy, and I kind of found myself in the have realm, but that was like racially limited. So I think that it's not necessarily that I did not have the support. I think from my like family, they definitely did the best that they could to like just allow me to be myself, to question when I had questions and things like that.
Yeah.
But the world around me didn't like that. So I got a lot of that from like teachers, other authorities, that other adults that were like, I talk too much, I share too much, I'm not in a child's place, I'm not being a good girl. And so I think I picked up on that throughout my life. And so that translated into this idea of like, once I got to maybe like high school, I'm like, I know how this works. I know that I can be exactly whoever this group or this person needs me to be
It's like
in order to
yourself.
fit in.
Yeah. So
could
like with the
be
reader,
friends
like
with anyone. I could be friends with anyone. I could hang out in any spaces. I could be with.
So would you call
all
that
types
chameleoning, like, or faking it till you make it type of thing?
I would maybe say it was more like code switching. But
Can
for
you talk about
me-
what code switching is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that code switching has been something that Black people have done for survival. Some people have kind of transformed it now into like some ways that they try to present themselves as being more superior. I always commend the young people because they said, fuck having a work voice.
They sure
And I
do.
love them for that.
Yeah, same here.
And I know that like older people can't stand it. And I'm just like, why do they have to talk differently? You know what the fuck they're trying to say?
Yeah.
I think I've had to come to that.
Yeah.
Because I had really grew up in a space where it's like you have to act this certain way to do these certain things to get this certain lifestyle to look this certain way. And so
how did that code switching, or how did that having to constantly change yourself either affected your sense of self in a personal way, or did it affect it?
Yes.
Or did you feel like it opened it up? Like, what was that?
I think that it just really made it hard for me to really know who I was and what I wanted, because I was able to kind of conform into whatever someone else was wanting. I didn't really have a lot of information around what it was that I was looking for until I kept running into experiences that it felt like it would feel like it was not enough. It would feel uncomfortable or feel like it wasn't for me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was happening because I'm having a good time.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I'm having a good time. I'm getting that social acceptance, that social capital. It's also I'm having a slightly different kind of thought process, because growing up I've always known like who I was and questioned a lot of things of like why men can do this and women can't do that. Why is this look like this and this doesn't do that? But even though my like identity of who I was the firstborn who, like you said, with expectations, knew my role in the family is to walk a straight line, to get the good grades, and mind you, I know my mom and my dad would often say, you are a
example.
Thank you. Your siblings look to you. So always feeling like there's eyes
I didn't give
on
a shit
me.
about that. I was the middle child.
Literally always thinking about who's looking at me, who's like, who am I also involving in my thought process and my decision making. And to the point that like when my siblings do things and they do not consider me, it's like a hurt like that happens in me because I always
you were trained to consider that.
And that's part of my identity, right? Like it's literally is I am the lighthouse like that is always constantly looking and monitoring. And I mind you, that's something that was given to me, but something I've embraced at this particular point, right? Like I knew this is who I was. I've always been intelligent, but I've always talked. I like talking, like, and I also got the similar things of great grades. Talks a hell of a lot, right? Like, but also I also with the code switching piece, right? It was different. I'm African. My mom got schooling from London,
England.
Britain, so she has a British accent. My dad is Nigerian, like so my accent, the way that I speak, the way that my like verbiage, words that I use, right? A lot of people immediately would either
assign whiteness,
ridicule me. What am I trying to prove? How me, just my existence, just me being me just asking certain questions, all of a sudden is a rebellion. Like that's when I started to notice that my identity, like as a woman, was somehow like being like impeding on other people's stuff by just being myself, because it would be me like asking questions or being as demanding or as assertive as other people, and then being looked at as like, what audacity do you have to do these things? Right? Or with my black counterparts, oh, you're acting white, oh, you're acting uppity, you're doing these things. And mind you, I'm just speaking regularly. Like that is regular to me. To me, code switching would look like, I guess, me speaking with what they call African AAV. African. That would be what it looks like for me. It's not me talking more professional, or because that's the natural way that comes out of my mouth. It would be me engaging in language that is.
I'm glad you brought that cultural aspect up too, because I think that perhaps has some things to do with it. Like being an African American, I think that I really don't have a significant amount of like cultural traditions that align with identity. That is something that was intentionally stripped away from us. They wanted us to not be able to identify so we couldn't be free.
Because I was staying with Tyler. When I first met Tyler, I thought Tyler was Caribbean. Down to her last name. So I was just like, when you told me you were just Black American, I was like, oh.
No, but I feel like because I kind of grew up in a space where I had a lot of access to like Caribbean culture, and I also I look at people that are from different Caribbean cultures as like audacious and free, energetic. I feel like that's something that I've always been drawn to.
Maybe that's the part that's innately in you.
Yeah,
right?
I think that is just because I'm like, this like a diaspora thing.
Yeah. And I think that plays a role. That's the thing I think with identity. I think it's, where I can kind of that's where part I go into our natural state.
Yeah.
Right. Because even like with my friends who are just African American, I'm like, you could always tell ancestral, like without even doing your, you know, your DNA network or stuff like that.
Have to pay for that.
But that part, I don't think so either. But I do think the fact that it's really the state of just being and living under your skin and what it looks like. And also I get it, like having the freedom or the support to actually do that. So even as you gravitated towards the Caribbean culture, was there a cultural appropriation that it kind of talked about that?
Sure,
So
like the cultural appropriation thing, I think I've been really more sensitive to that in my adult life, like just wanted to be very careful about like what is the difference between appreciating and appropriating. I'm in no way acting like I'm from somewhere that I'm not. I just have grown to appreciate that particular culture. But I think I've come to realize that perhaps attaching to things that align with like freedom and like power as a woman, to me, has been something that I've been attracted to for quite some time. I would say in middle school, I went through this whole phase around wanting to be, I hate this fucking word, but wanting to be ghetto. I went through this phase of wanting to be, and specifically wanting to be a DC girl. I looked at DC girls, and I still do today. I have my family's from DC, so I've kind of always been around and immersed in that culture, but I am not. But I always looked at them as like free, audacious, saying what they wanted to say, not taking no shit. And I came from a place where it's like, you need to be a good girl. You need to not talk too much. You need to not say too much, not rock the boat. Right. So that was like, oh, I'm that. Yeah. Y'all are docile and I'm that.
Yeah.
So I think I went through this time where it's like I had associated that with being ghetto.
Yeah.
And that I had to kind of like learn that like, well, that's really not what that is. You want to be
it's a
free
culture within itself.
You want to be able to say what you want to say. You want to be firm in what your beliefs are. You don't, I don't even really know. To me, I don't really know what it means to be ghetto at this point.
That's a really good, honestly, that's a really good point, because I will say that in African culture, I can't speak for all Africans, but I know in Nigerian culture, ghetto is seen as lower than, less educated, rowdy. Right? You talk about audacious. It's rowdy. It's what's called shaking the table unnecessarily, bringing attention to yourself in a negative light. But I wanted to talk a bit about like being a good girl. And you even had said the same thing too about like what your mom did not endorse.
Like girls aren't supposed to act
some of those things.
I tell her all the time, I said, it's the shh.
Yeah.
But you want to know what, and it was, and my mom used to do the very much thing, because I remember growing up, I hated wearing dresses, which is so interesting.
Girl,
now
like
that
a
you guys,
mofo shit.
But compared to me now, right? Like I used to hate wearing dresses, skirts, anything that made me feel or seen as softer.
Yeah.
Like, and mind you, not feminine, soft, like weak, specifically, because in Nigerian culture, there's a clear hierarchy between men and women. Men are seen more powerful. They're the ones that have the control. They're the ones that do the directing. They're the ones that discipline. They're the ones. While women are the lieutenants. They're the ones that help the general get the stuff done. And I didn't like that dynamic growing up. I did not.
You wanted to be a general.
I wanted to be the one in power, because there was a lot of, mind you, also, it was also what was pumped into me as the older person, that I was the general. I was
the leader.
The leader. But going back with my mom, it was about, like, now that I'm older and I look at this identity, this hyper feminine identity that is placed on us women, but specifically Black women, right? About dressing a certain way, looking at, my mom used to be, every time
you don't want to be
I would come to her house, and just coming to see her and wearing sweatpants, and she's like, why are you dressed? I'm like, because I'm coming to see you. And she's like, well, you don't know who will see you on. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
I don't give a fuck
either. But it used to make me so upset, because it's like, well, why do I need to care all the time? Because again, the eyes on me, right? I already feeling like there's eyes on me. So it's like, why do I always have to consider whose eyes are on me? But it was for protection. Because unfortunately, even with me being smart, even with me being, I believe, kind and warm and just how my natural kind
Yeah.
of thing. People already assume that I'm aggressive, I'm mean, I'm,
Yeah.
what's it called, a
That's
danger.
that.
Yeah,
So
and I had
that's
to
real.
realize, I had to come to terms with in my own like search for who I am. I had to come to terms with that. That's not my fucking problem. Like,
Yeah.
but it's not your fucking problem.
is
But
their shit.
unfortunately, that's, even though it's not our problem, we're still
Stigmatized.
We're
Stigmatized, but
conditioned
and also
to work around
labeled.
that.
like,
and-
it's not even like, my thing is not even that. It's like, it's kind of like if somebody shits on your front door, it's not, you didn't do, but you still got to clean up with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If me coming up to you, and if I'm just like
and
sharing my
profiling.
opinion,
It's like a profiling.
intellectually, like I'm in
Yeah.
class and I'm talking about things, mind you, all of a sudden, oh, why are you talking? I'm talking too much.
Right.
I'm doing these things. If I, mind you, if I dress
Yeah.
proper, all of a sudden people are much more with ease.
It's inviting.
Yeah.
They're much more
Yeah.
willing to take and lean into what I say if I look a certain way versus if I don't.
But that's the whole thing with black boys in hoodies.
yeah,
and the
the
assumption.
respectability
Yeah,
politics.
right.
Or black women in bonnets.
In bonnets.
And, oh,
Yeah,
you're
like-
less than and you're
I'm
ghetto.
don't
so
even
tired of
know.
that conversation. Like,
But it just because, but it comes. It
Wear your
does
bonnets,
come
y'all.
down.
Just wear your bonnets. if
Do
you
that,
want
but
to.
it also, we also have to recognize,
But-
do that, and it comes with certain consequences,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we talk about with identity is that hyperfeminism that our parents, our mothers specifically instilled to us was because unless you were dolled up,
that's what helped them
unless you were,
survive.
you would have been beaten, you would have been dehumanized, like you would have been
Yeah.
seen less, and I have experienced that.
Yeah.
But
And-
it felt
and for sure.
odd not
I think-
understanding that.
I think
Yeah.
that the trash thing about it is that the dehumanization of black women will happen even if you are showing up in those ways that are for your that are respectable or that are
Yeah.
appropriate. And I think that that is the lesson that I had to learn in order for me to be okay with like it doesn't matter. I can
Yeah.
perhaps learn how to take whatever those consequences are and
Yeah.
find the spaces that are for me
Yeah.
versus trying to like make sure that I can be palatable.
Yeah.
I
I
can't.
mean,
So
yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't, I disagree. I guess my thing about it, going back to like the person was saying about like identity, and like we've been with clients who wanted to shift their gender identity because of what we're talking about right now.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
of the fact that like I said, I didn't want to be seen as weaker and softer
Right.
Yeah.
and as a target because of what I wore. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, I see an uptick of girls who were assaulted, who were looked down upon, who
Yeah.
feel the weight of like what it is to be a woman,
Mm-hmm.
wanting to shift, like have
To
a different
change their
identity
gender.
and to be seen and not
In a
have to
different
hold
way.
on to these like
Yeah.
feminine things. Like I have
Yeah.
a client that talks a lot about like their figure, right, is more feminine in terms of like hippie and all those other things, but it almost like perpetuates this thing of I'm a sexual creature that
Yeah.
people will perceive. So it's like I want to be seen as something blank,
Not
that
that,
nobody
yeah.
will put that on me.
Yeah.
So shifting the conversation. So in saying this, identity does matter.
Yes.
And how do we teach people and how do we ourselves start to live in this authentic, or as I would like to call it, natural state, in our
Yeah.
natural state of self? Because I think that's really what people are missing and yearning for, is identifying what is my natural state of self.
I think it takes a lot of affirming and support.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the support piece is where we don't have as much control
Mm-hmm.
because I do think that like you have to perhaps find yourself in spaces where you can practice
Right.
just showing up, just being yourself, whether that is the pleasant version of you or the version that is difficult to manage. And you also have to be reinforced in those spaces. So that's where that support comes in. Like I have to be in relationships with people where I can say, I had a shitty ass day and I don't want
Yeah.
to talk, and not be told that I'm not being a good friend or I'm not being a
Right.
good person because I'm not showing up the same exact way every time. So, but it takes practice and that support from your environment. And some people don't have that. So they spend their lifetime trying to find and land on their identity.
Yeah.
Or know how to cultivate it. I guess another
Yeah.
thing for me in terms of like you said is listening to yourself, because the confession said that they have a tendency to like almost absorb
Other people.
the interests, the values, the demeanors of
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, what about those traits, attributes, or those things are attractive to you? Because sometimes the attraction might be connected to what you actually enjoy,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
are you attracted to it because of what you can get? And that's
Yes.
a difference.
Yes,
That's
that could
true.
perhaps be the thing around
Yeah.
like how you can discern between like, is this something that I'm genuinely interested in, or is it something that I'm like doing to mask survive?
Or is it changing and flipping with the seasons? That's also will
Exactly.
tell you if it's like more of a fleeting thing, minus the ADHD folks with our interests.
Or the neurospicy.
but right, but I'm saying like think about like for example for me, I've always been someone who's into like Asian culture
culture,
and Asian
yeah.
things. I
All
mean
of it,
anime,
food.
K-pop, food, like, and that's
Yeah.
a reoccurring thing that every person who knows me
Knows that about
knows
you.
that that is something that
Yeah.
I enjoy, never changes, never shifts. People also, I remember something that did change, right, in terms of identity. Growing up, I would say I wasn't a competitive person, right? I was like, when they asked me,
That's a lie.
when they no, but at the time they asked me, I was 12, 13 years at the time when they were like, oh, are you competitive? It was right before I started getting recruited for basketball. And I would say no, because I was not put in an environment outside of maybe academics
That you had to
where I
compete.
would have been competitive. Because the only way, it's not like you can be outwardly competitive in math class. You can't be
Right.
like, fuck yeah, I got an A+. Like you're not about to do that and celebrate in front of people. But when I started playing sports, when I started like put in environments
In
where
competition.
I'm competing for a position, then that part of me started to flash
Yeah.
out. So talking about the question of, is identity something inherent versus something that's learned? It's both and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because my
That
competitive
representation,
nature
too.
definitely showed up later in life, and I can embrace it and sit in that and not feel, oh, women aren't supposed to be competitive, so let me not show too
Or
much
when they
about
compete,
it.
they're supposed to still be nice girls.
Right.
Yeah.
Or don't,
Not
don't
have
talk too much
emotions
with a
about
boy.
it.
Don't make a boy feel what's called dumb. Well, if
Yeah.
he's dumb. That has nothing to do
Yeah, basically.
with me.
Child.
Probably not.
Don't
But,
even get me started.
you
You
know,
know,
so-
for me, no, I mean, look, I feel like this has always worked for me in a sense of just believing that I just am.
Yeah.
And, you know, I am wonderfully made. God created me as such. And also, I think it's important. I have learned now in my beautiful age, I have learned that there do need some I do need to have some limitations, some boundaries with myself, and not to oversaturate myself, because it does cause confusion to your mind, and to just really take it on a day-to-day of what I need to function as me, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So that's just how I kind of, I think we
agree.
should kind of close out with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
What are your thoughts about also the people that you're around? Because I think oversaturation can happen when you have energies and people that don't
Yeah.
align or are in contradiction. I think
And that's the
about,
part of the boundaries that I'm
you know what
talking
I'm saying?
about,
As you
right?
find your
But that's
identity,
exactly what
it
I mean,
feels
boundaries with
more and
myself,
more.
that I can't be exposed to everyone
to
and
every
everything.
single
Yeah.
person, especially
So
because you're
I
such
gotta
a like
limit.
warm and kind
Yeah, I
and
gotta limit
empathetic, and like
myself.
people
People
gravitate a lot
latch
to
on.
you and
Yeah.
your energy. And it took a while, and a lot of me being like, girl, like to separate yourself from like, I don't always have to make space for these other people and other
Exactly.
things, but I like think about how like when I entertain certain friendships, like growing up, like the situations that I would place myself in,
Right.
I wouldn't do that if it was just
Right.
me.
Exactly.
Like
Right.
and
See, and that's
even
what
though
I mean.
it led to lessons that I think
Yeah.
further
You needed to
sharpened
learn,
like
maybe.
my identity and like
Right.
who I am, or like, oh no, like I didn't have to like test this. Like I know that this is me. Right? Like it helped just kind of like fortify this idea that like your values and who you are sharpened by the people that you're around. Like being around you guys genuinely like fills me with joy, not because, oh, I get stuff from you guys, which obviously I do. I get the abundance of joy, advice, like, you know, care and nurturing and all of those other things. But like you guys also provide direction. Like Jay, you're always really good at being like, okay, I know that you've been having this going on, but you know, you've been talking about this and this is what something that you're about, like, you know, and Tyler, you're really good at being like, okay, like, you were talking about this thing, like, what, like, so you guys are very good at helping move in the direction of what's important to me.
So what
and you
community,
need
like
to
what I'm
have
hearing is that we say like
that
community
support.
and support matters.
Yes.
Okay,
It
good deal.
does. It does.
So let's transition to our listeners letter.
Okay,
and
let's
see how
hear
that
it.
goes. My mom was abusive to me as a kid and is kind of a terrible person all around. Just really horrible to everybody and has completely isolated herself with no friends or family or anyone in her life because of her behavior. She also would not be the kind of person to want to work on herself or take responsibility. It always is the other people who are out to get her or it's their fault. I know she has a therapist, and this has made me wonder in situations like this, what is it like for the therapist? Do you try to challenge people's thoughts, or do you just let them vent about everyone else in every session, even if they're not making progress? Is it tough to be a therapist in this situation, or it's fine?
Yes, it is tough to be a therapist in those situations, and it depends on what type of therapist you are.
Sure is.
To see
Sure
if
is.
you're going to call your clients out or not. The type of therapist that the three of us are, DBT therapists, yes, you are
We
going to get called
behavioral as
out.
fuck.
But
Yes.
really, people be lying to their fucking therapists. So
Yes.
who knows
And
what your mom,
let's
how your
not
mom
pretend.
is showing. Like,
Well, at least these three therapists here know that y'all be lying.
Yeah.
I don't know about everyone
Exactly.
else, but I
Exactly.
think that we're under the healthy suggestion or the idea that, oh, you're not telling us the full
story.
experience.
And my clients can see it on my face when I don't believe them, unfortunately.
You know,
I'm like,
you know what I do when I know a client is not fully telling me the full story? I always say, I want to be clear. I'm only hearing your version of it, so we're just going to focus on that. That's my secret thing, because I'm like, bitch, I know you lying.
But see,
Like,
I
I know this was more than what you're
Then
saying.
mine is so help me understand why the other person would respond that way.
Yeah.
What information might they have about you that would
Right,
make them
yeah.
question you or even show up this way? Then
but
all
I
of a
do
sudden,
I think the type of therapy that we have requires that accountability.
Yes,
The type of therapist that we are.
Yeah.
Your mom could perhaps be going to a therapist, or if your mom is the way that you have described her, she could perhaps know what type of therapist that she wants to go
attach
to
herself
for
to.
what. If you are looking for a therapist that is going to just allow you to vent, that will just validate your experience, you can find that.
Yeah.
also she might be seeing a CBT therapist because, as you noted, the thought is people are out to get her. So that would be, the therapist would probably work with them challenging those thoughts, looking at those cognitive distortions. But just because you know that you're engaging in like black or white thinking of like it's either this thing or this thing, doesn't necessarily mean that you have the tools in real time to combat the experience that happens. There's a reason why they say it's a mental health thing, because your brain, right, your mind,
You've convinced
it connects to multiple different things. So your mind, while it's running this narrative of people are out to get me and it's always other people, your body is
creating
also
the things.
confirming things in it. And your vision is also spotting things that reinforce that thing. So regardless of how much you toss it in your mind, the result is going to be the same unless you hit a specific type of therapist that works on acknowledging that these things will show up for you while really like carving your behavior around who you want to be.
I think I'm glad that you brought that up too, because it sounds like the reader also has her own specific narrative about mom. And perhaps maybe
based on their
to see mom even
experiences
in a different way.
way. But also, let me be clear. Not a therapist shouldn't be keeping client as a client if there hasn't been any progress made. The point of having a treatment plan is to ensure that whatever the goal the client in the therapist outlined
They're
for
working
themselves,
towards
there
that.
should be work towards progress. Be clear that your mom, whatever years of the way that you experience her has been, it's not going to take 3, 4, 10, 20 sessions for her to start really engaging. When people get the first hand to even talk to somebody, it does become vomiting. It does become a sense of like
I just gotta get it out.
victimizing.
Yeah.
And then it may take after 6 to 8 months for the therapist to kind of switch it back around to, or 3 months. It don't take me that long, because I'm telling you, it don't take me that long. But to switch it back around and be like, okay, well, let's look at these different entities.
Yeah.
So being very mindful, also telling the reader, focus on yourself and be straight with your mom about how you are experiencing her when you interact with her, and even consider, if you yourself have your own therapist, having family session, adult or not, you could always have family session with your adult parent if they are willing, because if she's open to going to therapy, I'm pretty sure she's also open to possibly having therapy with you, so you and her can outline the way that you've experienced her. And to the last part, is it tough to be a therapist in this situation? Not for me though.
I was gonna say
it's not.
that.
Not for me, because for
You
the
don't
simple
take it
fact,
on.
yeah, I
Yeah.
actually take on. Like, your mother would be the perfect client for me, because I would eat her alive. But either way, like, I take on and I welcome these type of clients, only for the simple fact that people are trying to healing. The fact that she's going to therapy, to me, that's a plus.
That's
and
an
the fact,
in, yeah.
So I want you to focus on that, and also focus on you as the child, or the adult child, because I don't know your age, around knowing that she's taking that first step to becoming a better version of herself in her healing process. Can I take advantage of that to also let her know how I experience her? So that's my take on that.
I was also going to add this piece of that, like what you said with the treatment plans, is just because you as the adult child is not seeing the progress doesn't mean that progress is not being made.
There you
Because
go.
it's like, what did the mom
What's the standard?
initiate therapy for?
Yeah.
Might not have been for the things that you think that the person should initiate therapy for, and that's where the discrepancies kind of lie.
Correct.
Yeah.
And like you said, building rapport takes time, and different clients are on different levels of openness and willingness to kind of like conquer certain
Keyword
things.
is willingness.
Right? There's like certain, I would say, like temperatures, right? Let's say like there's hot stuff, or maybe the easier low-hanging fruit that they're willing to talk about, right? The things that, I'm spending too much money, like the things that they're willing to accept.
Right.
The warm stuff are the things that maybe other people have brought to their attention that they're also now starting to see that is causing an issue. The cold stuff is the things that solely other people have seen and nobody else.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So
exactly.
There's
Exactly.
levels to that.
All right. So this has been really a good episode.
It has.
Talking about identity, and just kind of keeping in mind that, like we tell you that, you are who you say that you are.
Right.
But you can reach us at, go ahead, Ty.
Couch Chronicles, TAD@gmail.com, if you are looking to send in some confessions or some listener letters. We may read them on the show.
Also, and check us out on IG.
Yes.
And catch
All
up
the
on
all
episodes
the
as well.
spots. Interact with us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.